Today we are going to discuss on the topic Mera Bharat Mahan. One time, a German visited India. And he was cherishing the flavors of India. So he was in Mumbai and he was looking for some different flavors. So while roaming around here and there, looking for some different flavors, he saw an Udupi restaurant, and therefore he went in the restaurant to partake of some different unique flavor. So the Udupi restaurant had a traditional style of serving their traditional recipes of dosa, sambar, and idli, vada, and so on. So the style of serving, the ingredients, the recipe, everything was very traditional. There were not even plates. It was a banana leaf on which the entire serving took place because of the tradition of this. So the German liked it. It was eat as much as you can. So the German ate a lot. He enjoyed the new recipes, new flavors, different setting. German was very excited. So the German ate everything. So he ate whatever was served, and he asked for multiple servings. And then whatever was served, he ate that, and finally ate the leaf also, the banana leaf. The German was really excited. Sorry. And now, because it was an international clientele, the owner of the restaurant was very enthusiastic. He was very much eager to know how his client felt, because this was an international doorway which was opening for his small restaurant. So he asked the German, how was it? What was your experience? So the German said, food was very nice. Food was amazing. Food was very nice. But the salad was a little stiff. The salad was a little stiff. So what was the salad? So the German, because he ate everything, including the banana leaf, because he never knew what to do with that banana leaf. So he thought it is salad, and therefore he ate it up. And therefore his experience was everything was very nice, but the salad was a little stiff. This goes to show that uniqueness has to be interfaced in a proper way. Otherwise, it will give a different flavor. So there is a methodology, and there is a in which the uniqueness has to be interfaced. So otherwise, one may find everything super, but in between some stiffness, some problem here and there. So anyhow, we can see many unique things happening in the nation around us. So one of the point is that such a big country, you know, the peninsula is such a big country, and with so many varied interests, with so many varied goals, attitudes, and all of that coming together, with so much noise and so much rattling. I mean, that is something what we familiar about. But the interesting thing to zoom in this whole setting is that with all anomalies, all discrepancies, all inabilities, all kind of corruptions, all kind of procrastinations, all kinds of laziness, with everything in place, the amazing aspect is that in this country, things still move forward. That's an interesting and amazing thing. So the question arises is that what is making things move forward? Or what is making things work out? So therefore, uh, actually we can understand that just by living here and just by staying around India, one can understand there is a divine power behind which is making things work out, because it is not humanly possible. With all corruption, with all laziness, with all vested interests, to move things is literally not possible. It is the divine power who is making things possible. So one's faith in God can increase. See the country. So one time, it was the month of December, and we were supposed to have. So we had organized a picnic, and this picnic was supposed to happen the beginning of January, but we thought to have it a little early, because what used to happen is in KGP culture most of the times that the New Year would be celebrated in train. Most of the times. So to report by first to second January, and by most of the times, 31st would be in train. That would be the scene. So we thought, okay, let's just after Christmas, let's gather and have picnic so that we can celebrate the New Year in the picnic spot. But actually, in the winter season, as is natural, there is fog and the sun doesn't rise, and therefore the trains are late. So that time also the trains were running late, 18 hours, 40 hours, so on. It happens only in India, no problem. So therefore, the day we were supposed to start the picnic, we started the picnic after 3 days, because different people were assembling at different times. The first one came one day late, like that. The last one came 5 days late. So that was the scene. So it was so one of our devotees was coming from Delhi. His train was one day late. So he was sitting in the train. I mean, finally his train came one day late. Train started, and he was coming. So at one particular station, one gentleman boarded the train, and he was boarding, and with the raised nose, he was scanning all around, scrutinizing, and scanning. His vision, his fingers, his existence got focused on one number. That was this our devotee seat number only. And this man, he just circled that number and he said, this is it. He was, and then he was looking with a very scornful face towards our devotee. Our devotee lying down towards below. So he's a devotee student. So he started checking him up. He started telling, hey, Mary Siddhar, chalo, get lost. So this devotee, he was sleeping. I mean, he was saying this. So he got up. He was not understanding what happened. Where from the gentleman, hefty gentleman has come. Anyhow, he said, भाई साहब आपको कुछ ये doubt कुछ गड़बड़ हो गया होगा. I also have a proper reserve ticket, deal properly. I mean, let us resolve. What is the, Then our devotee started repeating the bogie number and all that. He said, no, मेरा भी यही bogie है, यही seat है. चलो निकलो. Then our devotee, he didn't understood what to do. So anyhow, he thought, and then he said, okay, show me your ticket. He said, नहीं तुम ticket दिखाओ पहले. So devotee said, okay, he showed his ticket. It was the same bogie, the same seat. And this man also took out his ticket then. And it was matching. But both had the same bogie and the same train, the same seat. How can this happen? Well, anything can happen in India. How can this happen? So the same bogie, the same seat, and then this man, he was completely bowled out there itself, the gentleman, and he started giving commentaries to the railway ministry, to Indian government, to humanity, and so on. So then some eureka idea came, to our devotee. Then he was scrutinizing. He said, "Okay, give me, I am going to do the analysis." And he was scrutinizing both the ticket. What is the difference between the two? There has to be some difference. What is the difference actually? What is the unique difference between the two? And finally, he found one. After a lot of deliberation, he said, "Hey, I found one." So the difference was legal. I mean, so the difference was that our devotee, it was the 7th of December. So our devotee's ticket was dated 26 because that his train was supposed to be 26. Same train, same bogie, same seat. But the date was 26 and this train was exactly 24 hours late. So the other gentleman actually, he came to the station and he found the train has come, the train, the same bogie and the same seat number. His ticket was the same, everything was the same. Only problem was his date was 27th. The date was also the same. The place of reporting was the same. The station was the same. What was the policy was that the train was not the same. This train was the previous day's train, and that day's train was not yet announced when it will reach. So there are so it took a good amount of time and endeavor, you can understand, for devotee student to explain this whole concept to that gentleman. Finally, he understood. But as soon as he understood, there was another problem. He realized that the train had started moving, and this gentleman had hefty luggage. So it was a scene of all scenes to see this gentleman, and then he had to run his way down, somehow or the other, run his way down with his hefty bags to unboard the train because the train was leaving the station. So anyhow, there are many places in the West where Indians are very much wanted. One of our devotees was sharing his experience. He went to Seattle Microsoft, and he saw in Seattle Microsoft itself there are 50,000 Indian employees in Seattle. And he was asking one of the Microsoft managers, who himself was an Indian, that why so many Indians here? This is America. They said, no, Indians are very much wanted. They said, and then our devotee was asking why. And the manager was explaining, you see, the point is that Indians have a unique flavor actually, which is not found in the West world. Therefore, Indians are in high demand. But what is that unique flavor? He said, what happens is that this computer is a very strange machine. Such a strange machine that anytime it gives any kind of problem, and you really don't know what's happening, because it can give any kind of problem. Everything was running fine, and you have now everything was running. You take a sip of water, and now sit back again, touch the mouse, touch the keypad. It is giving a very serious and severe bug now. And then you keep bugging on the bug. The bug doesn't bug you off, and the bug is there for 8 hours. And a person is doing night out. A person is, his deadline is getting thrown off, and he's not able to run. He's left, right, scrolling the entire thousands of lines of code, debugging this, that. The error is not getting reduced. Not figuring out what happened. The computer is a very strange machine. And sometimes it happens, the person got so frustrated, he gives a punch on the desktop CPU. and he's so much, in anger, he gives a punch on the CPU. He gives a punch, and then after giving the punch, he calms down, he sits down, again he, touches the mouse, again he touches the keyboard. Now everything working very fine. So computer is a very strange machine actually. So therefore, this manager is explaining that because computer is a very strange machine, therefore a lot of sahishnutta is required to deal with the computer. And that kind of unique potentiality, he said, is a unique gift which Indians are having. Therefore, Indians are in very high demand. Because many times in the West, if there is some, as long as things are good, then it's all fine. When there is problem, they don't really understand what to do. Like one time, many years back, we heard, we were hearing the news. In US, there was a very deadly power cut. One day it lasted. At the end of the power cut, the news said so many people had committed suicide during the power cut. What was the logic? The logic was that because they were never used to power cuts like that. So there was this power cut, and people were wondering, oh, there is power cut. Now what to do? There is no light. Everything is dark. Now can't do anything. What to do? What to do? What to do? People not understanding. Some people thought, okay, let's commit suicide then. What to do? So they committed suicide. The Western world is like that. The Western world is like that. I have seen even in Melbourne, when the climate is, when things are fine, it's all okay. In Melbourne, what happens is that whenever there are rains, in the winter season, there are rains. Sometimes the rains are a little heavy, not like India, that the roads, not like India, like 200 centimeter or things like that. But yeah, sometimes there are the rain showers. Most of the time, the rains are drizzling. There's just some drizzles like that. I mean, even if you don't take an umbrella, you can just get a chill experience. In chill cold winter, there are these drizzles, adding spice to the chilling cold. So the cold from chilling becomes biting. That's all. But otherwise, not much. So, but sometimes there are rains, and then what happens is that in some streets here and there, some streets in the Melbourne, or maybe down the bridge or somewhere, some water collects. When this water collects, what happens? The whole traffic stops. So they don't know what to do with it because they don't expect. So the whole traffic stops for 5 hours. Whereas in India, even if flood is there, people are making their way out. Is it not? So that's the point. So therefore, actually, in India, so Indians are in high demand, and highly respected. One time, one German was telling me, "Oh, you are an Indian." I say, yeah. First, he was telling me that, "Oh, are you from Eastern Europe?" And I'm from Poland. So now I'm from India. Oh, you're from India? Oh, yes, we like Indians. We like Indians. Okay, I understand. So that's the point. That there is this unique potentiality. Unique potential. Like you bring a Western person and make him sit in the local train, and the fan of the train is not working, which is the usual phenomena. Now, it will be an impossible problem for him to crack because he will feel, okay, the fan is working. Where is the app where I can lodge a complaint? Where is the, how much is the frequency of response, and so on and so forth. So he'll keep figuring that out. The destination will also come. But for an Indian, the fan is working. There's no problem. This fellow will take out a 1 rupee pen, and hit the fan. The fan will start working. Will that solution come? That solution only be thought of in India. So there is definitely something unique. There is definitely something unique about Indian culture. So much of this potentiality, or much of this uniqueness which is manifesting in a very weird way, but yes, it is manifesting. So much of this uniqueness is coming from Indian tradition. So there was an economist made a theory, getting inspired from India. This theory is called a Jugaad theory. Jugaad theory means when you don't have resources and you figure out how to get resources. I mean, you just do so Jugaad theory based on Indians' mentality. Jugaad. So this weird kind of potentiality, which is still glittering here and there in bits and pieces somewhere here and there, is basically coming from Indian tradition. And the hallmark of Indian tradition is its spiritual roots. Indian tradition and culture, the hallmark of that is its spiritual roots. And therefore, we have seen that Vedic India has been glorified all over, even by Western Indologists and historians who had visited India in the late phases or the middle phases of the Mughal dynasty. Just to call it as the golden bird. So that means highly prosperous, very high satisfaction and fulfillment index. But all that was not just because of external factors, but because of people's devotion and dedication to God. Because Krishna was in the center, everything materially was prosperous. That is what is the verdict of scriptures. That when spiritual well-being is taken care of, material well-being always follows the spiritual well-being. So it is the spiritual well-being which should be ensured. Material well-being will naturally follow. It is a byproduct. Material well-being will naturally follow spiritual well-being. That is the point. That is the point. So let us see a glimpse of Vedic India. We just want to browse through a bit about the science in ancient India. So much of the modern day science, which we are proud of, had been existing in the Vedic manuscripts, had already been devised, fabricated, and designed in the Vedic manuscripts. So in Yantranava, which was written 14 AD, the definition of a machine is given. That which generates power or energy of motion. So through the continuous movement of various parts, like lever, pulley, two-thread wheel, inclined plane, screw, the machine. This is the definition of machine Yantranava in 14 AD. So in Samarangana Sutradhar, which is one of the Vedic manuscripts, chapter 31, this is 1150 AD, the various attributes of the machine are mentioned. So much of what we understand is modern day machine mechanics and engineering. Yeah, good contact and all the moving parts, adherence to rhythm, timing, showing results the moment desired, returning to normal state other times, not bulging or staying in shape, strength, softness, durability. That is the attributes of a machine. Yeah. So this is a very beautiful verse glorifying Lord Krishna, which is written by Kalidas. And Kalidas is telling, Gopi bhagye madhubrata shringishodadhi santika khalajivata kaitava galahalara sandhara. O Lord, who is anointed with the yogurt of the milkmaids. So the milkmaids worship Krishna. The yogurt of the milkmaids worship. O Savior of the fallen, O Master of Shiva, please protect me. This is the verse which Kalidas has written. The interesting point in this verse is it is a glorification of Krishna. But in this verse, actually, Kalidas is encoding the value of pi up to accurately up to 31 decimal places. So if we decode this verse by the Katapayadi number scheme, which means so the matrix of which or the directions of which are being explained. Tuka kha ga gha ja is given cha cha ja ja na is giving 1 2 3 4 9 0, and similarly then da tha da dha till then ta tha da dha, they are also given 1 to 9 and then 0. So if you follow this nomenclature and one letter, actually if we start breaking it down into numbers, we get the value of pi accurate up to 31 decimal places. This is the glory of Vedic India. Their lives are evolving around devotion and dedication to the Lord. But we see them because of that materially also they are on a superlative scale in terms of material acumen, material prosperity. By the way, the value of pi was first calculated by Bodhayan, who also explained the concept of Pythagoras theorem. And Bodhayan's work dates back to 6th century, which is very long before the European mathematicians. Yeah. As far as universities are concerned, the first university in India which was established was in Takshila in 700 BC. It had 10,500 students. Yeah, I believe the present strength of IIT is also around 10,000. Students with more than 60 branches, looking like IIT KGP. Similarly, Nalanda was in 4th BC, one of the greatest achievements of ancient India in the field of education. Yeah, this is Post magazine, July 1987. The Sanskrit is the mother of all European languages, and Sanskrit is the most suitable language for computer software. So that was the power of ancient Sanskrit mantras. Some more revelations. Now this verse comes in Rig Veda. The verse number is 10, 22, 12. This earth is devoid of hands and legs, yet it moves ahead. All the objects over the earth move with it. It moves around the sun. The sun has tied Earth and other planets to attraction and moves around itself as a trainer moves the newly trained horses around itself, holding their reins. So the sun moves around itself. Yes, the sun also moves. This was revealed to modern day. In modern day cosmology, it was revealed much later. Yajurveda talks about the motion of the sun. the sun moves on its own orbit in space along with itself. The material mortal body is like Earth. Yeah, the mortal body like Earth with the force of attraction, and he moves the other mortal bodies like Earth with the force of attraction. Yeah. So the moon receives light from the sun. Rig Veda. Yeah, there are many such pillars like this Dhar pillar. This is 14 meters in height and 7 tons in weight. It's a non-corrosive iron pillar, iron which never catches rust. There are many such pillars which you can find in India actually, and amazing. The chemical composition is still unknown. I mean, it's marvelous. It's marvelous. So Kannad's Vaisheshika Sutras give a whole comprehensive discussion of physics. If you want to study BSc MSc physics, actually, instead of studying from some Griffith, we can study it from Kannada's Vaisheshika Sutra as well. So one will be able to understand the concepts of mechanics, hydraulics, electricity, quantum, atom space, physical chemistry, heat, light. So this is all there in Vaisheshika Sutra. Yeah. So he mentions magnetic field. So there is the definition of force. There is the definition of in Vaisheshika Sutra. There is a mention of gravity and everything what we can understand in physics. This is an interesting observation. So what you see on the right side are in various columns, in alternating columns, are the scripts of the Indus Valley civilization, the ancient script, and the script of the Eastern Island, which is located in the Pacific. And if you see both the lipi, the scripts, alternating columns, column by column, if we compare, we will see their scripts are remarkably similar. The script of the ancient Indus Valley civilization and the script of the Eastern Islands, remarkably similar. So in Yukti Kalpataru, which was written in 11th century, there is a description of Nauka, that how a ship should be made. See, there is a full description of how a ship should be made. What should not be there? Iron should not be used for joining the planks of the ship bottom, because iron exposes the ship to influence of magnetic field or magnetic rocks in the bottom of the sea. That will lead to sinking of the ship. So such details were there in the 11th century. Yeah. So this is a cutting from the diary of Vasco da Gama in 1497. Yeah. So actually, so there is this comparison. So Vasco da Gama himself has drawn in his diary when he came to India in Zanzibar. Vasco da Gama's ship is Sao Gabriel, which is there in the lowest and the left side figure. The lowest smallest ship is Vasco da Gama ship. So when he came to India, he saw all these ships which were much bigger, and the biggest ship. The biggest ship what he found was 3 times so the biggest ship was 3 times as big, and its Gujarati owner was named as Skanda. So Skanda was coming to India, and with his help, Vasco came to India in this way and discovered India. And Vasco da Gama actually he had the biggest ship of his country, but those ships were very less than very small than the ships of the Indian traders. So in 1811, Lieutenant Walker writes that East India Company had an Indian ship called the Darya Dalaut, which did not require maintenance for 87 years. No maintenance was required. That was the quality of Indian engineering at that point of time. So similarly, the definitions of magnet are mentioned. Aeronautics. Maharshi Bhardwaj. He authored Yantra Sarvasva, which includes the discoveries in aviation science, space science, and flying machine science. So today, very few verses of this are available. It says that out of the 100 chapters and 500 sutras, only 37 verses are still available. And so Maharshi Bhardwaj was a very strong supporter of Ayurveda and mechanical sciences as well. So his Yantra Sarvasva, we have only 37 out of 500 verses available for us. But anyways, whatever is available is amazing. The details that are available are astounding and amazing. So these are glimpses of aeronautical designs in the Brahmanika Shastra, that how spaceships should be made and how airplanes should be made. Yeah. So the definition of a woman. Okay, what you're seeing here is the description of the definition in Agastya Samhita about an electric battery. So it is much what we study in class 8, 7th or 8th actually. So the interesting thing is that so we can find the same copper, zinc, and mercury. That is the definition of a battery. So I believe Tamar is copper, and yeah, Parada is mercury, and then Dasta, and the third line you will see Dasta Loshto Nidhavatya Paradatha Ditastataha. So Parada is mercury. Parada is mercury. So in this way, the battery is defined in Agastya Samhita. The electric battery is defined. So yeah. So when a cell is prepared according to Agastya Samhita and measured, then it gives an open circuit voltage of 1.138 volts and a short circuit current of 23 milliamperes. These are things which are mentioned in Agastya Samhita. Yeah, then this is a description of how eclipses. So this is dated around 5th century AD, where it is being explained how eclipses take place. So now, in every field we see Vedic. So we will see many of these Vedic manuscripts are lost, according to Indian. And what we have is, but those bits and pieces in themselves are sufficient enough to actually give us to at least give us one understanding that Vedic India was replete with the acme of technological advancement. So what you're seeing here is the contribution in maths, where we are seeing Indian origin of a particular concept and the Western origin. So the numbers are mentioned in Rigveda and the Indian origin, and the Western origin is 100 BC. Similarly, when you talk about calculus, Bodhayan in 800 BC only describes it, calculus, Bodhayan. He described calculus in 800 BC, whereas the Western origin is 13th century. So Vedic mathematics is mentioned by the Bharati Krishna Tirtha. He mentions about Vedic mathematics in great depth, and Western there is no origin about Vedic mathematics. So numbers like 10 to the power 63 with their names are mentioned in Ramayana, which was 6000 BC. But in Western origin, still we don't work with numbers 10 to the power 63 and so on. We work with million, billion, trillion, quadrillion, but we don't work with 10 to the power 63. Contributions in biology. Cell division is mentioned in Bhagavad Puran 4000 BC. Analysis of ears is mentioned in Rig Veda. Embryology, which was discovered in 19th century, is mentioned in Aitareya Upanishad 6000 BC. There are many interesting things which are yet to be researched in the Western origin, like head transplantation. Now we have heard about heart transplant, but we have not heard about the head transplant. So Shiv Puran talks about the head transplant mechanism also. Chromosomes are mentioned in Mahabharata 3000 BC, and it's only in 19th century that we have discovered it. Artificial limbs, Rig Veda talks about it, but we have discovered it in the 20th century, the Western origin. Yeah, so interestingly, the last line, if you see, giving life to a dead body, Garud Puran mentions about this 7000 BC. That technology is also there. But in the Western origin, this technology is yet to be researched. Similarly, contributions to physics. You can see the velocity of light, Rigveda mentions in Sayan Bhashya in 1400 AD. Yeah, so Sayan Bhashya on the Rigveda in 1400 AD mentions about the velocity of light. In Western origin, it is the 19th century. Similarly, nuclear energy is mentioned in Mundaka Upanishad 6000 BC, and the Western origin, we came to know about it in the 19th century itself. Similarly, fission and fusion, Atharva Veda mentions about nuclear fission and fusion, but we came to know about it in the 19th century. Yeah, that's why so many Western philosophers and scientists, historians, marvel at India. So many of them. Yeah. So this is Einstein. When I read Bhagavad Gita and reflect about how God created this universe, everything else seems so superfluous. We owe a lot to the Indians who taught us how to count, without which no worthwhile scientific discovery could have been made. Yeah. India conquered and dominated China culturally for 20 centuries without ever having to send a single soldier across the border. This Hu Shi, former ambassador of China to USA. Yeah. In religion, India is the only billionaire, Mark Twain. So Vedic India is an amazing proof of the fact that when there is spiritual intensity, material prosperity has to follow. Material prosperity has to follow. Srila Prabhupada gives a very beautiful example in this regard. Srila Prabhupada says that actually a devotee, he becomes the best in any field he takes or in any field he undertakes. Prabhupada said, a devotee does not mean that one becomes an outcast or one becomes an outdated or one becomes eccentric and so on. A devotee, he becomes the best in whatever his undertaking is. Srila Prabhupada said actually that there were this in the history of mankind, there are these two biggest wars which have been fought in the history of mankind, uh, and the two incomparable heroes of those histories uh, are both pure devotees of the Lord. These are the greatest fighters of all fighters, greatest warriors of all warriors. The man of the match in the two biggest wars the world has ever seen. That is the war of Ramayana and the war of Mahabharata. And the two greatest heroic fighters who pure devotees of the Lord were Sri Hanumanji and Arjuna. So Prabhupada makes this point that the devotee, when a devotee is not an escapist. Devotee, he does the best in everything, and because his goal is clear, his goal is spiritual. Uh, he excels everyone else on a material footing. So generally, devotees don't try to prove themselves or show off that they are very intelligent or they are very powerful or they are shell smart than others. Generally, devotee may not want self-aggrandizement. But if for the service of the Lord it is needed to rock it, then devotees have rocked it. And no one has been able to compete with them. That is the point. So we will see actually that for a long sustained success, there are three ingredients which are very essential. That for one to be really successful, materially speaking, one should have a proper goal. A goal should be framed. There should be some goal. There should be some destination to go, to move, for one to get a kick to start. The goal is not just sufficient, the process should be there. A proper process should be revealed. One should be able to envision a process. How do you achieve the goal? And then the environment, the surrounding should be supportive. If these three things are there, then a person can rock it. And we have seen examples of successful people in the world. Only when they have got these three were they able to excel in this competition of life or in this exam of life. Just like we hear about the childhood of Bill Gates. We hear about Bill Gates. Okay, he raised, he erected Microsoft. Yeah. So single-handedly, he erected Microsoft and such a giant, and so on. So, but how did it all come about? Actually, how did it all come about? It didn't just came out by chance that okay, Bill Gates got a kick. He got an environment which enabled him to do that. So, which enabled him to do that. So, like say for example, when he was in school, we hear the anecdote that his school had actually purchased a certain amount of internet hours uh, for the whole month, for the whole school. And Bill Gates was so enthusiastic in sitting in the computer lab. He used all the internet hours himself, the whole quota of the school. So they got that so only when he could get that process, that environment, could they excel, like that. So could they excel actually? So that is there. So Bill Gates had been so successful because of that. Obviously in the recent times now, because of some character issues, actually there are a lot of talks about his reputation and he's no more in Microsoft and things like that. So anyways, that proves the point that character is more important than material success. And to ensure character, spiritual footing and dedication is most important. Similarly, we hear anecdotes about Einstein. So Einstein used to be a very sluggish kind of boy, would be always sleeping in the class, and he would never be attentive, and he would be always drowsy and sleeping, and he would be completely distracted. So, so his teacher had called the Einstein's mother, and she had told that you better take him off. He's not fit for education. Actually, that he doesn't. Nothing goes in his head actually. So generally Einstein, I mean, his mother pleaded and all, then these boys given another opportunity, last chance, and all that. So anyhow, so generally Einstein would be sleeping, and much after the and he would be sleeping, and a long time after the school would have ended, he would wake up and then he would go back. That was his usual routine. One day he was sleeping, got a little early. Means what? That he got up. Then he used to get up after the school had just finished, everybody had gone, and he was all alone in the classroom. Get up like that. But this day, actually, he got up a bit early. The school had not ended. I mean, it was the last period going on, and the teacher was scribbling something on the board. So Einstein thought it was a homework assignment, and he thought, okay, let me look at the questions. And he read those questions, and Einstein got interested. Oh, he really got interested. He took down the questions. He started solving the questions. So that day, Einstein, he went home. He was solving the question. You know, and his copy was actually completely in a clean sheet because he would be sleeping all the time. So from the beginning of the copy, he started writing. He didn't took dinner. He didn't sleep. Nothing. He kept writing, solving the question till the next day. The next day, Einstein came before time. This was really unusual. This was the sun rising from the west. That kind of situation. Einstein coming before time, and he was sitting on the first bench. This was really unusual actually, because this had never been. Nobody could imagine Einstein would do that, but he did that day. And Einstein was very enthusiastic. He was waiting for the teacher to come. So finally, the teacher arrived, and Einstein was waiting. And Einstein says, "Sir, and the teacher said, what happened to you? It's all looking very weird. What's the matter?" Einstein says, "Sir, you gave some homework. I have done the homework." And he submitted this big full copy. And he said the solution is there in this full copy. So full copy had filled, writing like that. And the teacher said, "Yesterday I didn't give any homework." I said, "No, you are writing something on the board. That's the homework. I did that. I completed the homework, you see." And the teacher was shocked of his life. The teacher was trembling because he could recognize what he had written on the board. And the teacher said, "You think that was the homework?" He said, "I had written down some of the greatest unsolvable problems of physics which are not yet solved, and scientists of your. And what did you do?" And Einstein said, "No, it was a homework actually. I started working on it. I have solved it." That was Einstein. So they got an environment. So here we see Einstein is also, he was so he was very sluggish just because he was not getting any kick. He was not getting the proper environment. When he got a challenging question, then he started showing his flavors. So that is the point, that we need a proper environment, proper goal, and a proper process which can help us. If that's missing, then everything is missing actually. So that's why we see people sometimes become materially successful, but because there is no goal, but the goal is so flimsy, then after being materially successful, people end up into character scams and so on. Even materially speaking, many times that someone needs to have a proper goal. This tiny puny material goals are not going to work out because it's a temporary situation. It's like many times we see in India, students, they are dying to go into IIT. When you get into the IIT, people are dying to go into MIT for higher education. But when a person lands into MIT, what does he do? Many people commit suicide. From IIT to MIT, from MIT to suicide. Many people commit suicide. In fact, the statistics say 1,200 students of the age range, 18 to 28, in top tier, Western universities like Ivy League colleges and this Cambridge and Oxford and all these colleges, they commit suicide every year. Every year, statistics 1,200. So what is missing? What is missing is a spiritual goal. That's what is exactly what is missing actually. So because now okay, there is no problem going into IIT, there is no problem going into MIT, but actually at the topmost goal one should have put the Almighty. So IIT, MIT, ultimately Almighty. Then it would have been perfect and good, like that. But when the Almighty is not there, then everything crumbles and collapses actually. So the greatest damage to society can happen when the society has an illusory goal. When the goal is very transient, temporary, sensual, illusory. That is the greatest damage which can happen actually. The potentiality is there, but the goal is very topsy-turvy, and therefore the output is very flimsy and miserable. So the mentality and proclivity has to be rightly utilized. That's the point. Otherwise, it comes up in very shabby ways, which don't have much tangible efficacy. Like my father was telling, he had studied from IIT Roorkee. That time it was the University of Roorkee, autonomous, university, autonomous university. Later it became IIT Roorkee. That's another story. So my father was telling me, he said, in my batch, everybody used to score very high marks. CGPA was very high. So many people were above 9. Some people were just below 9. It was very, very high. So I said, wow, people were so studious that time. He said, no. It was some other things. I said, what is the other thing? He said, no. Our batch was very unique and special. Our batch people had siddhis. I said, what was the siddhi? He said, no, they had siddhis. So he was telling me that there was a special technique which they had devised, and they would teach their next descendants and all that. They would make sure that this siddhi remains, the parampara remains, it doesn't get extinct. What was the siddhi? Siddhi was that just by watching the movement of the hand or the tip of the pen, they were able to understand what the other person is writing, and they would exactly copy. So therefore, what they will do is that one person will study and 6 people will get the marks for it. So they sort of team spirit in that way. The mil baant ke marks like that. So everybody was getting very good marks. Can you imagine how is it easy actually? That just by watching the hand movement, can you figure out what is being written? Requires a high degree of tapasya and siddhi, and meditation, attention. So when I heard this, I was, I was feeling how unfortunate in one sense, because the amount of energy or consciousness or meditation or practice or whatever which is required to master this siddhi, in that much time, the one can mug up his subjects and get good grades anyway. Then what point is that? For that proclivity, similarly, we can see actually people exhibiting various kinds of siddhis actually. So if we happen to be in Bombay and travel in the local trains in Bombay, oh my God, people are standing in different mudras, different mudras and asanas. Some people are standing on one leg, and different mudras and asanas people standing. I have seen with my own eyes actually that in the local train Bombay, people they get into the train, they're standing actually, they're just holding with one hand. They have only 1 feet. No, the second feet is in the air. Only 1 feet on the ground. There's no much space. The bag is somewhere. They also don't know where it is. And it is jam packed. And it is jam packed. And I have seen standing like this. These people are sleeping. And to the shock of my life, how can you sleep in this state? But the gentleman, he's bindas sleeping. He's completely, just completely sleeping, and he's just standing next to the door, on the side, and he's sleeping. and sleeping. All of a sudden, this fellow gets up. He looks here and there, and then one station comes, and this person gets down. That is his station. And I was wondering, अरे इसको कैसे पता चला इसका स्टेशन आ गया है? कुछ अलार्म नहीं बजा, कुछ नहीं बजा, and this fellow was sleeping. He was completely bowled out, and all of a sudden he got up. When the train stopped, he got down. That was the station. Siddhi, na? So people have such siddhis. So one of our devotees in Calcutta, uh, so I came to know he also had a siddhi. What was his siddhi? His siddhi was he could sleep with open eyes. He was also passed out of IIT. So he would sit in the lecture hall on the first row, and he would sleep. And because he had that siddhi, nobody would understand what's happening. People, the professors would think, oh, such a studious fellow, he's looking so attentively at us. And this fellow, he would be sleeping with open eyes. His eyes are open, he's looking at the professor and he's sleeping. Can you imagine? Very good siddhi, no? Very powerful siddhi, actually. True story. Like that. True story. KGB. So anyhow, he became a devotee. So the potentiality getting misdirected, that's the point. That is the point. Why? Because the spiritual goal is missing, actually. And therefore, people are running behind these illusory goals. The potentiality is getting misdirected. One time I was in Bangalore. I was working in Bangalore for a few months. And one of our devotee friends, he introduced me to I think he introduced me to one of his colleagues from NIT Warangal, actually. So I said, so I met him and all, so I greeted him for coming to the temple, encouraged him in spiritual life. So he was a manager in Intel, big manager in Intel. So when we went back, actually, Devotee was asking me, did you observe him? I observed him. He was a manager in Intel. It seems that he was interested in spiritual life. That's very good, Krishna's great mercy. He said, no. He was happy with his wife was there. I said namaste, Hare Krishna, to his wife. That's all. But I didn't remember anything more than that. I didn't pay attention to that because I was just talking with him. So, and he said, you should have observed his wife. I said, no, I don't have the habit. Shastra say, one should not be looking like that at ladies or, so he said, no, not in that way, but I'm telling something very, so he started explaining the story. So he said, all kinds of Romeo Juliet or whatever, Heer Ranja songs and all that, and like a madman, he was roaming, searching for his wife, here and there, searching for his wife. So this is Bangalore. Finally, actually, very frantically searching here and there, he found his wife in a hotel in Puri, with another man. So his wife had run away with another man, So she had a boyfriend, it seems, that way. To speak in more polite terms, she had a boyfriend, it seems, So this man, this gentleman, he got rid of the shock of his life. But anyhow, he brought his wife back, like that. And I don't know what he did to that other man, with whom his wife was staying. So I don't know because this devotee never told me that, and I didn't want it to intrigue him too much on what he was narrating. So he brought her back. So she started staying with him again, and after a few months again, she was missing. So this time actually, this manager, he had got machine learning, so he knew how to process it. So he was not much disturbed this time. This time he knew all the algorithms, how to work it out. So he found her and he got her back again. And this devotee is telling me till date, 3 times his wife has run. We don't know when she will run away the fourth time. And I was so. I mean, this was so this is the story he was narrating to me, and so I was shocked actually in one sense. My God, and I was in one sense marveling on the tolerance limit of this Intel manager. My God, this man is so tolerant actually, that he's accepting. Again and again, his wife runs away, and he gets her back, and so on. But actually, it's a very good quality, tolerance. Uh, but actually, I was feeling it's really unfortunate because this is such a good quality, but it is being channelized for not a very worthy cause. If you tolerate for the mission of the Lord, if you exhibit some quality for the mission of the Lord, then it is glorious. But for a here and there cause, just because that lady was very beautiful or whatever, uh, so it's a little unfortunate. So the whole point is that there is no doubt about the potentiality of India, but that potentiality has to be channelized in the service of the Lord. Then it will lead to a glorious effect. That is the point. Then it will lead to a glorious effect. You say, but that potentiality is there. Nobody can deny that potentiality. Previous ages we talk about gurukuls, we hear about gurukuls and all. Actually, people they used to send their children to these gurukuls, and these gurukuls will be far away from the home, and children will be staying in very simple setting, and they would be leading a life of focused dedication and attention and discipline and all that. So that's the kind of gurukul system we hear about. But modern day India is not much different actually. Only the setting and the nomenclature has changed. The concept and the principle can still be found. So the modern day equivalent to a gurukul in a far off land in the forest and all, the modern day equivalent of that is JEE coaching in Kota. It's like a modern day gurukul. That children leave the comforts of their family, they leave the comforts of their family, and they come to far distant land where they are staying in a very simple setting. They're not getting much comforts and all, and life is filled with tapasya, and they're leading a life of discipline. Always they have to be on their toes, because if you are not on the toes, you will score less in the weekly test. If you score less in the weekly test, then your batch will go down. And if you are not in the A0, B0, P0, and if you roll down to A4, B4, or A6, B6, P6, like that, then your chances of getting into IIT is not very good because you don't get the best professors and all that. So the whole point is that people are out there for tapasya, the modern day gurukuls. The concept is still there, but just because, yes, it makes you come. No, we must say, okay, yes, that concept is making, that tapasya concept is making one get into IIT. But then people, after getting into IIT, they are dissatisfied. It is solving one level of problem, but the actual problem is not getting solved. The people are still dissatisfied. People are still empty-hearted. People are still miserable. And the reason for that is because the spiritual goal is missing. Because the spiritual goal is missing. That is why our bhakti can act as the foundation of everything in our life. So when we are talking about these great heroic warriors like Arjuna and Hanumanji, we are talking about these warriors, their endeavors and activities are not materially motivated. So they were not motivated by greed, lust, envy, and so on. Their motivation was service to Krishna, which is a far greater and powerful and irresistible motivation than any other material counterpart. How much one will go on a drive of greed, but for the sake of service of the Lord, a genuine devotee can do anything. It's a far more purer far more nourishing, far more auspicious, but a far more powerful motivation. So therefore, some people, when they propagate the rumor saying that one who becomes a devotee loses the motivation to do any material activity. Sometimes people say, and because this fellow has become a devotee now, he will lose his impetus and motivation to do any tangible material activity. That is not true. So rather, one gets access to a much more auspicious, pure, and powerful motivation. That is the spiritual motivation. Now wants to do it for the pleasure of Krishna, and therefore one tries even harder to do it. So, like student, when the student's dharma is say duty is to study, say for example, when a student becomes a devotee, then now his study motivation is not just because I'll get a lot of money, I'll get a good girl if I have a very good position or a good job and all that. No, that is not the motivation for a devotee. But a devotee does study very enthusiastically, wholeheartedly. Why? Because his motivation is that by this endeavor or by this duty, I can serve Krishna and please Krishna. By setting a good example for everyone, uh, that is, how can a student also practice very nicely Krishna consciousness? Is it not? So it is a much more purer but much more powerful motivation. Much more powerful motivation. So therefore, the spiritual setting has to be there. The spiritual setting has to be intact. Spiritual setting. Then the potentiality will be rightly tapped. Otherwise, it will be misused. So we have a lot of unique potentiality. And if we unleash it in the direction of service to Krishna, then it is going to yield phenomenal results, amazing results. So whatever amount and degree of westernization or sensual indoctrination has happened on the Indian grounds, still India offers a very favorable atmosphere, an environment for one to grow, spiritually and therefore materially as well. Spiritually and therefore materially as well. So the environment favors us. So say for example, to gain footing or to gain fixity and depth in on the spiritual grounds, it is explained that there are these 5 principles which are very essential. One is chanting of the holy names of the Lord. The holy names of the Lord. We see in India, in everything here and there, we roam around, we will find the names of the Lord. We can find the names of the Lord, being printed on BD, Ganesh BD, Sudama beer bar. You find the names of the Lord. It's everywhere. So the principle of chanting, and one can find a favorable atmosphere everywhere. Favorable atmosphere. So chanting the holiness of the Lord. The next principle the Shastras talk about is association of devotees. The association of devotees, the association of spiritually minded people, spiritual and minded people. So we will see. We will see even today, people have a lot of craze to at least get some stamp of spirituality, that we are also spiritual. We are also spiritual. So people want to get connected to some sangha, where they can at least get some stamp of spirituality, that okay, I am also very spiritually minded. So that I am also spiritual is a feeling which people have. So which drives them somewhere or the other to be connected somewhere or the other to some sort of religion, some sort of spirituality, some sort of practice. And therefore people feel that, okay, I am also spiritual. That gives a very good feeling of the heart. So that feeling is arising from the inherent mentality uh, of the person to be in the association of devotees, to be in the circle of saintly devotees, sincere devotees. Now the third principle which Shastras talk about is dham. The holy dham is very potent, very important for one. So being present in the holy dham and offering devotional service in the holy dham, not just pay a visit, click a selfie and come back, but executing devotional service in the holy dham from time to time. This is the principle which is explained to intensify one's footing in bhakti. And India is such a place, so amazing, that if you take any dot on the map of India, in 2 kilometers or in not 2 kilometers, say in 2 hours vehicle distance, you will find 2 hours vehicle distance radii, you will find some or the other dham. Like in North India, Vrindavan is very near. Some of the other dham, here in Calcutta, Mayapur is very near. Puri is very near. So, some or the other dham, some or the other dham, and people have an inherent mentality of dham. People have an inherent mentality of dham. So I remember actually in KGP, so one of the services which we do is we many times host a camp for many uh, so we host a camp for many other outside colleges so that students can come and see how IITians are also practicing Krishna consciousness. How do we practice Krishna consciousness? What is our routine? Our Mangal Aarti, all our programs, how does it take place? So one time actually, the first time one group came from NIT Durgapur and NIT Silchar actually, we gave them the best of prasad. We gave them the best of the gada and everything, all very posh, clean, everything, pick and span. So the 2 days passed, Saturday, Sunday, and these devotees we chose, they were going back. So they were very tensed up. They said, Prabhuji, seems that everything has got wasted. I said, what happened? We took so many classes, we give so much prasad, we make them dance so much, everything and all that. I said, nahi Prabhuji, waste ho gaya. Boys were not very happy and enthusiastic. Flop ho gaya, flop show. So we were feeling very morose because we were doing overtime, cooking for them, arranging facilities and all that. I said, okay, but then I asked, what happened really? I said, why it was a flop show? Because here it was such a nice spiritual ambience and all that, very vibrant and all. He said, there's no doubt about all that. फिर भी गलती की वजह से flop हो गया. So what was the mistake? The mistake was that I had designed that 2 days camp syllabus, and there was one very essential component which I forgot to put in. I mean, I had in mind initially, but then because this was first time, I never pressed on it, and it just went off without it. So the mistake was what, that I did not give a slot for these candidates and NIT Durgapur Silchar to have a dham yatra. मैं बोल सर खड़गपुर में कौन सा धाम है? तो खड़गपुर धाम का नाम है IIT, dedicated to the service of the nation. वही है धाम. So people, when they are coming to KGP, they have such a craving to go to that dedicated to the service of the nation. अच्छा आप लोगों ने देखा नहीं होगा, कि photos में देखा होगा. So anyway, the institute entry point, main building, the first building entry point. there is that slogan dedicated to service of the nation. In front there is a round park type of people stand there and click photographs. That's a normal scene. So when people come and people are going, coming, going, they keep clicking photographs there. So anyhow, people were feeling so much offended. The boys, the students are not at all happy. We gave them such spiritual classes, such terrific explanation of Krishna consciousness, which is adventurous on its every footing. But people were not excited. They said, no, we are not inspired. Why? Because we, with all our intensity, we fed them paneer sabji, we fed them whatnot. Lacking element was I did not plan a 3-hour slot for this Dham visit. Going to the IIT Dham and visiting and clicking photographs, and the dedicated to service of nation, the Hijili jail and the Nalanda and here and there and everywhere. So I got a lesson from my life. And then the report will come that the people are really happy. The PMs will say, oh, wonderful. People are really happy. This was like the camp of their lives and so on and so forth. What is the most punching thing? The most punching thing was Dham Yatra. So you see the mindset. And when we did not include IIT Dham Yatra in the schedule, the boys are not inspired. They were chanting one round and they said, okay, you keep the mala with you only. Whenever you want to chant, we'll take it from you. So they were not even ready to chant. They were so de-inspired that way kind of thing. Because we gave them everything, the best of arrangements, the best of prasad. We were doing overtime, till 1 o'clock in the night, 2 o'clock in the night, and so on. So that these young boys they can get the mercy of Krishna. But all our endeavors were reduced to zero because we did not plan the Dham visit. And next time onwards, Dham visit and everything was a full success. Box office, so it was blockbuster. The box office, the camps used to be like this. So I got a lesson from my life. So the point is that mentality for a Dham visit. And what will they visit in that Dham? They will visit they will do the round of the institute area, going from CSE, architecture and back to the Hijli jail, and then coming on the other side, and then coming to Meta and rubber technology and all that, and electronics, and then coming back the Dham visit. So that is one round. Another round is a hostel route, 2.2 kilometer route. So they will just do rounds. But that so just by doing those rounds, then they were so happy that they said, okay, now you are telling us to chant, we'll chant. You're telling us to read Gita, we'll read. Why? Because our Dham visit has been successful. So this is the mindset actually. But yes, in India you can find dhams, holy places where we can go and recharge ourselves. The next principle which the Shastras talk about is worship. Worship. So people have such a heart for worshipping. People have such a heart for worshipping. Oh, they have such a fervent devotion and dedication to worship. So much so that when I came to Calcutta first time, I was shocked to hear that there are temples of some famous football stars in Calcutta. There are temples these fellows are worshipped because they're such powerful. I forgot the name of those candidates, but yes, some of the world famous football stars. The temples are there. That is the mindset for worship actually. So I remember when there would be World Cup, and even if it is semi-final or quarter-final, if it is India Pakistan, people will forget everything. So people forget everything. They'll not go to the office. They don't mind a salary cut. They don't mind anything. They just want to be there, even if it is midnight 1 a.m. People get up, but then or not sleep, whatever. Mostly not sleep. But then they would make it a point that they will do that. So such a fervent mentality of worship. So just imagine it is being channelized in some weird directions. Uh, similarly, people keep browsing through pictures of their movie stars and all that. That is a great mentality to worship actually. So this mentality is meant to be channelized towards God. And then we will see that everything in one's life is so auspicious. And the next point which is being explained in the Shastras, which is an essential ingredient, is hearing. Hearing of spiritual subject matters. The propensity to hear is common. You find in India, some people, take 2 hours to read the newspaper every day. They just want to hear some news like that. For 2 hours, they are glued to the newspaper. So that mentality and potentiality is there. And when that potentiality is offered in the service of the Lord, then it leads to a permanent auspicious transformation of heart, an elevation of consciousness. And one can access in that way immense oceanic mercy. Immense oceanic mercy. Immense oceanic. So therefore, that mentality has to be channelized towards God. One has to subjugate himself to the mission of the Lord to be able to unleash that potentiality. So we have to understand that being in India, one has a great potentiality. So it is not wrong to say that okay, Indians are like Hanuman; they can do service like Hanuman, and therefore, if they are misdirected, then there is very bleak prospects for the world. That if we are properly directed, actually, then Indians can do the job of Hanuman and moving rock boulders. That is the kind of potentiality, and that can be a unique and fitting service. That can be a unique and fitting service. So the point is, when one engages in the mission of the Lord, by being in the vision of mission of the Lord, one gets empowered. By subjugating oneself to the mission of the Lord, one gets empowered, and the fallacies and the limitations of the person who's practicing, they start getting washed off. That is the point. Just like when the group of Angada, Jambavan, and Hanumanji, they all came to the southernmost bank where the ocean was starting. Nobody was knowing what to do. How do you cross the ocean? Hanumanji was also sitting in confusion and despair. At that time, a thought and inspiration came to Jambavan, who looked at Hanumanji, and he started reminding Hanumanji of his powers. He said, "Oh, Hanumanji, you are not supposed to sit like this. You are the warrior of the warriors. You are most parakrami. You are the man who can do it, and you are chosen to do it. Take it up, stand up, jump, and hoist the Jai Pataka of Lord Ramachandra's glory everywhere in Lanka." So Hanumanji remembered his original powers, which were there, even at the time of his birth, and which was there in his childhood. But because of the curse of a sage, those powers he had forgotten. And now he was reminded of those powers for the mission of the Lord. So previously, Hanumanji, as a small child, was using all those powers, to create mischief for sadhus. But now he is going to use those same powers in the service of Lord Ramachandra. And therefore, Hanumanji was so divinely empowered. That is the point. Similarly, when Narada Muni is giving the instructions to Valmiki Muni, to write Ramayana, the Narada Muni is telling a very important point. So he is telling, as you undertake the mission of the Lord, everything will be revealed to you. The Lord will be revealed to you. So as you undertake service in the mission of the Lord, that divine spiritual awakening takes place, and everything starts getting revealed. Therefore, one should very enthusiastically and wholeheartedly offer one's service to the Lord, because if there is a spiritual goal and there is a process of bhakti, uh, coupled with the favorable environment, which is the spiritual waves and breezes, which are anyways prevalent in India, one can be amazingly successful. One can be amazing. That is the point. So be a winner for life, be a winner for eternity. And that is the Mahanata of India when we say Mera Bharat Mahan. That Mahanata is the dedication and devotion to the Supreme Lord. Hare Krishna. Thank you. So we'll stop here and we'll meet with you again next week. Hare Krishna.